headlines and our top focus. The United States and China have agreed to pause tit-for-tat fees on each other's ships that had become a major irritant in the broader trade war between the world's two largest economies and pushed up ocean freight costs. Now, this agreement is amongst the key trade deals reached in South Korea by US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping during their meeting that took place yesterday. The move provides a 12-month reprieve on an estimated $3.2 billion annually in fees for large Chinese-built vessels sailing to US ports. Remember, earlier this year, the Trump administration announced plans to levy fees on China-linked ships in order to loosen the country's grip on the global maritime industry and bolster the US shipbuilding industry. This was done under Section 301 penalties. It was followed by a US probe that concluded China's domination of global maritime logistics and shipbuilding sectors. This probe concluded that this was driven by unfair practices. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has stated now that Section 301 action had been put on hold. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. He is a strategist focusing on the Chinese economy and policies, joining us from Hong Kong. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. A very critical bilateral meeting had taken place yesterday. The world's eyes were trained on what exactly Donald Trump and Xi Jinping were discussing, because this trade war between Washington and Beijing has been simmering for quite a while, and it does have global repercussions. What do you think now this pause on the dueling port fees would now mean for global supply chains?
Well, this is more than just a trade war between the two superpowers. Is a rivalry for global influence and dominance. And the United States, on the part of the United States, there is a bipartisan, very deep-seated bipartisan consensus that China has proven to be an existential threat to American dominance and hegemony. On the part of China, all China wants is, of course, is the space and to grow its own economy and to become a stronger nation and to reclaim its rightful place in the sun. Now, these two trajectories are obviously causing a lot of frictions on the United States. And that's why the U.S. is pushing back, and on the shipping front, which is of course not directly only to trade, because China has over the years has proven itself to be the world's dominant shipbuilder.
Yes.
Out of perhaps 1,000 ships built per year, China's building 1,000, American is building only about 10. So, and this affects not only the shipping fleet, but also the U.S. Navy. And that's why the Chinese Navy has quickly grown to be the world largest in terms of numbers, though not in terms necessarily in terms of firepower. Nevertheless, because of this meeting, I think President Xi, even at the time of Trump 1.0, foresaw what was coming, and he knew that to negotiate with President Trump, who only believes in strength and power, China needs to grow its own self-reliance on technology and also other countermeasures, and recently has found a very effective countermeasure, a stronghold over the United States' Achilles heel, which of course is the China's dominance in rare earths, which was has been built up over the years. Now on the shipping front, so now the Trump administration has agreed to a pause because the shipping charges are on the charge of any Chinese-built ships, regardless of the fact it carries provided any Chinese-built ship, even if it carried a foreign flag, if it calls on any American port, it was subject to huge charges. And of course, this would hugely disrupt the group wind supply chain, is to also hurting Americans' imports and economy as much as the Chinese. And so both sides are calling a pause
Yes.
in exchange for China again suspending the rare earth restrictions for 1 year, depending how the two sides behave in the coming months.
Indeed. And, as we've been discussing for quite a while now, there have been multiple sticking points, the rare earths, whether it's the soybean purchases that China had reduced as well, the advanced computer chips that the United States had restricted from being given to China. Now, all of this seems to have been somewhat sorted. We're looking at a formal framework, of course, being released, but there is a statement by the Chinese Ministry of Commerce. It has emphasized that China will suspend its rare earths licensing measures. China will also resume its purchases of American soybeans. Meanwhile, Trump has stated that China may also be allowed to buy advanced computer chips from the United States, particularly from NVIDIA. The Chinese Commerce Ministry has also stated that the United States has agreed to suspend Trump's 24% reciprocal tariff on China for another year. Do you now think that a formalized deal is finally on the anvil?
Well, of course, there's always a formalized deal, one form or another. It depends on whether that deal is final, whether that would resolve all the differences and structural differences between the two superpowers. I think, yes, a formal deal is likely, but it's based on the agreed parameters in the sense that China is now restoring its long established position as the largest customer for the soybeans, because China, even regardless of its size, is an agricultural deficit country in terms of food production and also energy. So it requires importing a lot of food from other countries, and has been buying the soybeans for many, many years. And because of the trade war, it's diverted all the purchases to Brazil and Russia. So China is merely restoring its former position and suspending the rare earths restrictions for 1 year, depending what the Trump administration's further developments. So no, I think that's understandable.
Indeed, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us as we track further updates. More updates coming in from the APEC summit itself. Chinese President Xi Jinping has stressed that multilateral trade regime must be safeguarded. He's called for joint efforts to protect the multilateral trading system, to build an open regional economic environment and maintain the stability of industrial supply chains. President Xi has also called on to promote the digitalization and greening of trade while advancing universally beneficial and inclusive development. President Xi has made the call when he presented a 5-point proposal for building universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization in his speech at the 2025 APEC Economic Leaders meeting in Yeongju. Meanwhile, there is a statement that's come in from China's top trade negotiator, where he emphasized that Beijing would establish multilateral and bilateral cooperation platforms and dialogue mechanisms for green and low carbon development as well. He's added that China will actively cultivate green emerging industries and international cooperation in clean energy and the circular economy as well. In fact, speaking on rare earth export controls, Beijing has in fact maintained that maintaining a good grasp of security enables a better development environment. China's statement on multilateralism, of course, comes at a time when it has consistently voiced oppositions to the tariffs imposed by the United States, and has now been successful in lowering this threshold after the meeting between President Xi Jinping and US President Donald Trump at the sidelines of the APEC summit. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. Interesting statement by Xi Jinping. He's of course called for multilateralism, global supply chains to be maintained, their robustness to be maintained specifically. This comes in light, of course, of the more protectionist stance that Washington is applying. We've seen another statement from South Korean President Lee Jae-myung that had echoed such similar sentiments. What do you make of this?
Well, this is a subtle riposte, R-I-P-O-S-T-E, riposte to Donald Trump's unilateralism and also casting the rule-based, trading rule-based order to the wind on the altar of American first coercion. And of course, the rule-based order was actually led by the United States after the Second World War, when the United States was a benign hegemon. It's also mindful of other countries' interests, but also under the overall umbrella of American hegemony, which remained unchallenged for a long, long time until recently. And so President Trump is not abandoning almost entirely the so-called rule-based system in favor of American first. And using coercive and also aggressive tactics to bend other countries to the will of the United States. So I think that this is a subtle riposte to this kind of rhetoric and creating a more inclusive and more multilateral world. I think this riposte, of course, is receiving a great deal of positive reception from countries in the global south or even American traditional allies, which are also suffering from this destruction of the old rule-based trading order.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking our time sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World.